I never thought a job could completely take over your life. Not just take your time, but your energy, your confidence, even your sense of self. But that's exactly what happened when I joined the company. It seemed like a dream at first. Decent salary, central office, friendly team. I walked in feeling confident, eager to prove myself. My resume was solid, my experience enough to land the role, and the hiring process had been smooth. I was ready to start a career. My boss, Mark, seemed normal on the surface. Calm, professional, polite. On the first day, he shook my hand firmly, asked a few standard questions, and nodded politely at my responses. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. That's exactly why I underestimated him. The first week was manageable. HR walked me through procedures, I met the team, and I began learning the workflow. The office culture seemed fine. Colleagues were polite but distant. No one really went out of their way to help me, but no one actively hindered me either. Then came the second week. I had been working on a client report for hours, every detail triple-checked, every number, every chart, every line formatted perfectly. I thought I had done everything right. I went to Mark's office, confident, ready to present my work. He didn't even glance at the document. "This is what you're sending to the client?" he asked sharply. I froze. "Yes, it's the report you asked for." He slammed the file shut. The sound echoed through the office. Everyone froze. I felt every eye on me, pretending not to look, but I knew they were watching. "Everything here is wrong, absolutely everything," he said, and walked away. No explanation, no guidance, nothing. I returned to my desk, staring at my screen, heart pounding. I reread the report. Nothing jumped out as a mistake. Nothing. That's when Sergey, one of my colleagues, leaned over quietly. "Don't take it personally," he said. "He's like that with everyone." "What do you mean?" I asked. Sergey shrugged and walked away. "You'll see." I wish I had listened, because that was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and Mark's behavior only worsened. Criticism came constantly, even for minor things. Emails written in a cold, almost hostile tone. Instructions changed at the last minute, and when mistakes inevitably happened, he acted surprised and disappointed. He never offered guidance, only judgment. And yet there was a strange rhythm to it, almost like a game. He would praise someone one day, humiliate them the next. Give an impossible task, watch them struggle, then mock the outcome. Colleagues whispered about him, but no one confronted him. Emily was the first colleague who tried to help me. She approached me one afternoon while Mark was out of the office. "Don't let him break you," she said quietly. "He's testing everyone. But there's a way to survive if you learn the rules." I wanted to ask what she meant, but she gave a small, knowing smile and walked away. The first real test came during a major client presentation, a meeting that would define deals, reputation, even careers. I had spent weeks preparing, every slide, every number, every talking point polished to perfection. Mark arrived late, 15 minutes past the scheduled time, coffee in hand. No apology, no acknowledgement. And immediately, he began criticizing everyone. Then he turned to me. "This section is weak. Did you even read the brief?" I swallowed hard. "I prepared exactly according to the document you sent last week." His eyes narrowed. "Clearly not enough. Fix it, now." I wanted to defend myself, but I knew any argument would backfire. I spent the next hour editing the slides frantically, under his cold gaze, while he sipped his coffee like he was enjoying a show. By the end of the meeting, the client left confused, slides incomplete. I felt humiliated. After everyone left, Emily handed me a note discreetly. "Don't let him win. Pay attention to everything. You'll need it." The next few weeks were a grind. I became hyper-aware of Mark's moods, his subtle cues, his micro-expressions. Colleagues were either too afraid to help or too cautious to get involved. I started documenting everything, Emails, instructions, conversations. I couldn't trust memory alone. Then came the promotion announcement, or what I thought would be one. Mark called the team into the conference room. The position was clear. A managerial role was open. I had been performing well. My work was flawless. This was my chance. Mark didn't even look at me. Instead, he praised someone else, Lisa, a colleague I knew had less experience and fewer achievements. "You're ready," he said to her. "You've shown initiative, attention to detail, leadership." I swallowed hard. Inside, something snapped. Not anger, not despair, but a determination I hadn't felt before. I realized that in this office, survival wasn't about working harder. It was about understanding the rules of the game. Mark didn't reward effort. He rewarded control, fear, manipulation, and anyone who didn't play by his invisible rules was expendable. Then one afternoon, I discovered something that changed everything. While fixing a small error in a shared folder, I stumbled upon a client contract marked confidential. Curious, I opened it. What I found was disturbing. Mark had altered key clauses without informing the legal team. Client risks were being hidden, budgets manipulated, deadlines falsified. I realized immediately, this wasn't incompetence. This was deliberate, risky, potentially illegal. I couldn't believe it, and I knew that if I mentioned it, my career could end, or worse. But if I stayed silent, I was complicit. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, heart pounding. Then I noticed Emily standing behind me. "I know," she said simply. "And now you have a choice. You can play his game, or change it." Her words hit me like a shock. I realized at that moment that surviving Mark would require more than hard work. I needed strategy, patience, and alliances. That night, I sat at home, staring at the ceiling, the contract still open on my laptop. I understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a job. It was a war. And the first battle was just beginning. After discovering the confidential client contract, I knew my life at the company would never be the same. The next morning, I arrived early, laptop in hand, reviewing every detail from the contract. I had to be careful. One wrong move, one email sent to the wrong person, and Mark would know. And if Mark knew I was on to him, there would be consequences. As soon as I stepped into the office, I noticed Mark already there, sitting in his usual chair, coffee in hand, pretending to be calm, but his eyes were sharper than ever. He always had that way of making you feel like every small movement you made was under a microscope. I kept my distance, pulled my chair into the corner, started reviewing emails, notes, and files, pretending to be immersed in work. Then Emily approached. "You found it," she said quietly. I nodded slightly, careful not to make a sound that Mark could hear. "You need to be careful," she continued. "He's going to notice if you act differently. He always notices." I knew she was right. Mark thrived on fear, and any hint of defiance or suspicion could put me in the crosshairs. The day dragged on, every minute tense. Even the usual hum of keyboards and printers felt louder, heavier, like the office itself was holding its breath. Then came the meeting that changed everything. Mark called me into his office unexpectedly. I felt my stomach drop. "Sit," he said curtly. I obeyed. He didn't waste time. "I know you've been digging around," he said, voice low but threatening. My heart stopped. I hadn't done anything obvious. How could he know? I don't know what you mean," I said carefully. Mark leaned back, eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb. I know you found the contract. You've been looking at client files, poking where you shouldn't." I swallowed hard. I was just reviewing emails, double-checking things." He smiled, not the friendly kind, the predator's smile. "You're ambitious. I like that. But ambition without caution gets people fired. Or worse." He paused, then added almost casually, "You'll have to earn your place here." Show me you can survive. And with that, he dismissed me. I walked back to my desk, trembling. Mark had just made it clear. He knew I was onto him, and he was testing me. Over the next few weeks, the office felt like a minefield. Every task, every conversation, every glance felt loaded. I started noticing patterns in Mark's behavior. Small tells, slight changes in tone, moments where his attention sharpened. Sergey was surprisingly helpful, offering subtle advice without exposing himself. "Watch him when he's speaking to others," he said one day. "Notice what he values, what he mocks. You'll need that to survive." Emily continued to provide guidance, slipping me notes, reminders, and warnings. But both of them made it clear. You can't rely on anyone completely. Everyone has their own survival strategy. Then came the incident with Lisa, the colleague who had been promoted over me. Lisa was in the kitchen when Mark entered. He mocked her work, berating her in front of everyone. Normally, she would take it silently, as everyone did. But this time, she snapped. "I did exactly what you asked," she shouted. "Why are you always criticizing me?" Mark's eyes locked on her. The entire office went silent. For a moment, I thought she might actually get fired on the spot, but then he smiled, slow and deliberate. "Finally," he said, "someone with courage." But courage without control can be dangerous. He left, leaving everyone shaken. But something had changed. Lisa's outburst, although risky, had shifted the balance. I realized then that Mark didn't just crush people. He learned from them, adapted to threats, and played his own game. By the third week, I started forming a plan. I had to be smarter than him, but careful. I began documenting everything meticulously: conversations, instructions, meetings, even casual remarks. Every email, every change in the client files, I recorded it all. I also started small experiments. I would deliberately make minor errors in low-stakes tasks to see how he reacted, learning his triggers, his timing, and his patterns. Every observation added to a mental map of his behavior. It wasn't easy. Some days, the stress was unbearable. I started waking up at night, heart racing, replaying interactions in my head, analyzing every word, every gesture. I couldn't afford a single misstep. And then it happened. The first real opportunity. A new client account was being transferred to our team. The contract had several complex clauses, deadlines that seemed impossible, and a client with a reputation for being difficult. Mark assigned me as the point of contact. I knew this was dangerous. If I failed, it could ruin my career. But if I succeeded, it could give me leverage. I worked late nights, coordinated with Emily and Sergey quietly, and double-checked everything. When I finally presented the proposal to Mark, he leaned over, scrutinizing every number. For the first time, he didn't immediately criticize. Instead, he asked questions, detailed, probing, sharp questions. I answered each one carefully, using the documentation I had gathered. By the end of the meeting, Mark did something unexpected. He nodded once, just once. But it felt like a victory. Later, Emily whispered, "You passed the first real test." But the war isn't over. Over the next month, tension in the office escalated. Mark's behavior grew unpredictable. Some days he would praise, other days he would humiliate. Every interaction was a test. Then came the confrontation that changed everything. Mark called a meeting with the entire team. He revealed that the client I had been working with had discovered discrepancies, errors that weren't my fault. He blamed me publicly in front of the entire office. I felt my stomach sink, but I also felt a calm focus. I had been documenting everything. I had evidence. I spoke up. "Actually, Mark, the errors were in the original contract files. I documented each change and can show the timeline," I said, keeping my voice steady. The room went silent. For the first time, Mark looked caught off guard. He tried to regain control, but the evidence was clear. Even he couldn't twist it. That day, something shifted. The balance of power had changed slightly. I realized that Mark could intimidate, humiliate, and manipulate, but he couldn't destroy evidence. And I knew then that the next phase had begun. The fight wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about strategy, leverage, and ultimately, winning. The weeks after the Peterson account incident were unlike anything I had ever experienced. The office felt heavier, charged with tension that was almost physical. Every glance from Mark, every seemingly casual comment from a colleague carried weight. I realized that the job was no longer about tasks or deadlines. It was a psychological battlefield, and I had to master it or lose everything. I began my days earlier than everyone else, reviewing emails, client files, and Mark's previous instructions. Each interaction, each directive, each subtle look, everything was data. I documented it meticulously, not just in case of confrontation, but to understand the patterns. Mark was brilliant at controlling perception. He could make an impossible mistake look like the team's fault. To survive, I had to predict his moves. Emily and Sergey became indispensable. Emily had a way of seeing office politics from multiple angles. Sergey could read Mark's moods before he even spoke. Together, we devised a subtle strategy: build allies quietly, gather undeniable evidence, and wait for the right moment. Building alliances. It wasn't easy. Most colleagues had been silenced for years, conditioned to fear Mark's unpredictable wrath. Some were too cautious, others had been humiliated into submission. But I found small openings, discreet conversations, subtle nods, shared frustrations. I learned who could be trusted, who would act when it mattered, and who was only pretending to comply. Lisa, the colleague who had shouted at Mark weeks before, was surprisingly willing to cooperate once she realized she wasn't alone. She had been marginalized for months, her work constantly undermined. Together, we began compiling a comprehensive record: emails, meeting notes, screenshots, even audio recordings of Mark making contradictory statements or issuing threats. We were careful. Every move was calculated. Even a single hint that we were organizing could provoke Mark to strike, and the consequences could be catastrophic. The first strategic moves. My first real strategic step involved the next client account transfer. I was assigned as lead, with Mark overseeing from a distance. The client was demanding and the contract complex. Any misstep could ruin my credibility. But I turned it into an opportunity. I carefully double-checked every clause, every deadline, every commitment. I even prepared alternative solutions for potential obstacles. The day of the presentation, Mark tried his usual intimidation tactics, challenging every point, questioning assumptions, even making subtle digs at my competence. I had anticipated it all. Calmly, confidently, I countered each objection with data and documented evidence. Every point I made could be verified, leaving him no room to undermine me. By the end of the meeting, even the most loyal team members saw that my work was precise, and Mark's interference only highlighted the contrast between his words and reality. For the first time, I saw a flicker of frustration in his eyes. But it was restrained, carefully concealed. A predator forced to reconsider his next move. Escalation. Mark's retaliation was methodical. Tasks were reassigned, critical meetings postponed, subtle rumors circulated. He tested everyone around me, trying to isolate me. But I had already mapped the network of colleagues willing to act strategically. Emily, Sergey, and Lisa became my silent support, sharing observations and helping me anticipate his moves. During one particularly tense week, Mark called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair, calm but menacing. "I hear you've been poking around," he said. I stayed silent, letting the words hang. "I know you found the contract discrepancies," he continued, "and you've been documenting everything. Clever, ambitious, dangerous. But ambition without caution is a mistake. Be careful." I nodded, keeping my voice measured. I just want the work to be accurate. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned back, almost smirking. Good. Learn. You'll need it. I left his office, heart pounding. Mark had just confirmed my suspicion. He knew, partially, but he underestimated how prepared I was. The confrontation. The opportunity came unexpectedly. During the quarterly leadership review, Mark attempted to assert dominance over the team, belittling several colleagues while highlighting their mistakes. Everyone else flinched, but I did not. When he began misrepresenting facts about client work, I calmly presented the documented evidence. Every inconsistency, every alteration, every misleading statement was laid out clearly, with dates, emails, and recorded meetings. The room went silent. Mark attempted to interrupt, his tone sharp, but I had anticipated this. I remained calm, concise, and precise. Each attempt he made to distort reality was countered immediately with clear proof. By the end of the presentation, leadership was forced to acknowledge the truth. For the first time, Mark's carefully constructed authority faltered. His usual intimidation tactics carried no weight when faced with facts and documentation. Shifting the balance. With Mark's credibility weakened, the office dynamics began to shift. Colleagues who had once been fearful began to speak up. The culture slowly changed, subtle at first, then more openly. I continued to document interactions, but now the focus shifted, guiding the team to act collectively, ensuring transparency and reinforcing accountability. Mark attempted to regain control, but the atmosphere had changed. Fear alone was no longer sufficient. Leadership now relied on evidence and integrity, and my meticulous documentation made manipulation impossible. The final battle. The ultimate confrontation occurred when a high-stakes client contract came up. Mark tried to assert influence over the account, but I was fully prepared. Every email, every directive, every potential issue had been anticipated. I presented solutions with clarity, professionalism, and undeniable proof of past discrepancies. Mark attempted his usual intimidation, questioning every assumption, criticizing minor details, even trying to undermine my credibility in front of the client. But I countered calmly, relying on evidence and strategy. The client recognized the professionalism, and leadership saw Mark's manipulation attempts for what they were. By the end, Mark was effectively neutralized. Oversight measures were put in place, and his influence over the team was sharply diminished. The office, once dominated by fear, now had structure, accountability, and cautious optimism. Aftermath. Life didn't magically improve overnight. Trust had to be rebuilt, relationships repaired. But the office culture changed fundamentally. Transparency replaced fear. Collaboration replaced isolation. Colleagues gained confidence, and the team began to operate more cohesively. I learned lessons far beyond the mechanics of the job. I learned about strategy, patience, and the subtle power of evidence. Navigating a toxic environment required more than hard work. It required understanding human behavior, leveraging allies, and knowing when and how to act. Mark remained with the company for several months, but his control was gone. His intimidation no longer worked, and attempts to manipulate were quickly countered by documented evidence and collective awareness. By the end, I realized something profound. Survival was no longer the goal. Strategy, integrity, and preparation were, and those who understood this could not just survive, they could change the environment entirely.